Welcome to the 33rd episode of Tokyo Alumni Podcast. Today, our guest graduated from ASIJ in 2007 and attended the University at Buffalo to study biochemistry. Upon earning his bachelor's, he would go on to attend the West Virginia School at Osteopathic Medicine, where he earned his MD and DO. He has been dabbling with magic tricks since he was a little kid, but it wasn't until high school when he received a one-on-one training with a magician in the Philippines that he fell in love with the craft. He continued to showcase his magic tricks throughout his medical school time, especially to entertain patients. He believes that by sharing magic with patients, he has been able to provide them with a purpose and a more fulfilling medical experience. It has been a way for him to combine his two passions in life, which he said is his advice to students just beginning medical school. He currently works at the University of Pittsburgh Internal Medicine Department. Welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. So you have this thing called MD and DO. That confused me a bit. I did a little bit of my research, but I kind of want to hear from you. You know, I checked Quora and Yahoo questions, whatever. So I don't know if that's the most reliable, because most of the people I know who are doctors are MDs. You have both. Is that unique? And can you explain the difference between the two?
So DO is basically, there's two kinds of doctor degrees, MD and DO. The one that we see most commonly is an MD, but there's actually another degree called a DO. Now, it's a little, the philosophy of medicine differs a little bit, but the treatment is about the same. An osteopath is also trained in what we call neuromuscular medicine. So the way I say it is like you have more extra training in like neuromuscular. So let's say someone comes in with like a shoulder pain. Sometimes if you go to an MD place, sometimes a lot of the time they might say, okay, let's just make sure it's not broken. Is it a muscle strain? But an osteopathic doctor can do the same thing. They can prescribe medications, but they have this additional training where they can do some manipulation, and they might like stretch out a little bit. They might, what I do typically sometimes if I'm in clinic, I use like a percussion hammer and I loosen up the muscle if I think it's a muscular issue. But if I think it's something like broken, I'm going to get x-rays. I'm going to do the whole 9 yards and work it up. But if it's a muscular thing, it's something, I try to avoid medications a lot of the time because our body has a natural way of healing itself. Of course, if, it's broken, surgeries, those kind of things. But if it's just muscular, then why give all these pain medications when you don't need to and treat the underlying cause? So those are the two little philosophies. So essentially, the end of the day is the philosophy that I've always been taught is treat the whole person, look at the whole picture. Essentially, it's the same thing. We both, both degrees prescribe medication, both can be surgeons. And, it is confusing at first, but at the end of the day, both doctors.
And your path to becoming a doctor, it seemed like you were pretty set early on, right? You studied biochemistry, which is a fairly standard study during undergrad. But were you sort of consciously heading towards this doctor route prior to college, even at the high school level?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, I think back in middle school or something, we took the PSAT or something, and it tells you kind of like what would be good for your career. And oddly enough, it said doctor, but my grades were just so horrible. There was probably no way I could get in. And so I just kind of kept it on the back burner, kind of thought about it. And then oddly enough, that's when I slowly got into like my hobby of magic, and it started kind of progressing. And I realized the more I worked with patients, I really loved it, and I couldn't get enough of it. It's all I thought about was working, being with patients, sharing the art. And then that's when my mom was like, why don't you think about becoming a doctor and start sharing it more? And yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I guess once I got to college, I already had this straight path of this is what I want to do, but not everything in life goes as easy as you want it to. I'm sure a lot of us can speak from the bottom of our hearts about that. So I guess the bottom line is, deep down, you know what you want to do, and you just can't give up and keep going at it.
In the introduction, I mentioned how your fascination and your introduction, your initiation to magic was through this magician in the Philippines, a rather enigmatic Like if there's no like explanation, it's just like in the Philippines. So can you elaborate a bit on that episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So the funny thing is, well, I would say funny, but my mom is Filipino and my dad's Japanese. So I used to go to the Philippines a lot during the summer. And that's what happened was I went to the Philippines, and my mom kind of knew that I liked magic to begin with. And then my uncle was kind of like, hey, there's this Japanese magician the mall, and he sells tricks. And my mom's like, oh, why don't we go there? And so we did. And it totally blew my mind. He was doing all these crazy card tricks, coin tricks, and it really caught my attention. But the thing more than anything than just the trick was like he would talk about like little lessons, and like he would just put his little spin on it, and it would just intrigue me. I was like the kid at a candy shop, and I was like, man, I can't get enough of this. And so that's where it began. And I had the great opportunity to train with him for about a week. And then after that, he just said, all right, man, you're on your own. And you're basically, wow. I was kind of like, okay. But the thing is, like, once you learn it and you perform it to others and you see the look on their face, that astonishment, you're just kind of like, wow, that is amazing. And it doesn't matter like what culture, whatever, like if you don't speak the language, if you do something visual, it still captures anyone. And so it's been amazing, and so I always think about that day when I first found love. And, I recently was out of town, and, I was doing it, and I didn't speak a word of Spanish really that well. It was great. Someone helped me translate, but even without the Spanish, I mean, you just do something visual, you can still break the ice, and, it's kind of cool.
That's fascinating that it started at such a early time in your life. And obviously you're still heavily involved with magic. And when you do magic for your patients, I kind of have this image of like, sort of like a Patch Adams, you know what I mean? Like going into the child, I think it was like child burn victim, or something in the movie at least. Mm-hmm. Oh no, I'm thinking of another movie. But it was with children, more or less. It was the children's unit. So with your magic, do you feel like children are the main clientele, or is it just anyone who is your patient?
So for me, I'm specializing in internal medicine. So I usually take care of patients 18 and above. So I don't really see pediatrics. The last time I saw pediatrics was when I was in school. But that doesn't stop me from like going to the children's hospital and doing things. It's just, for me, when I saw kids, it was just, they're really sick or they're not, it's like a cough or a cold, or they're like really, really sick. And so for me, it was a little too difficult. I couldn't, deal with that. And so I thought my part of medicine will be just doing magic for them. But it goes to all ages. And that's the beauty, is it's evolved over time. And the way I put it is like, if I work with kids, it just depends on the kind of the energy I get with them. It's kind of like some kids are more artsy and crafty. So if I know they're artsy and crafty, then I'll do stuff with like Rubik's Cube magic. Then I'll do a little bit of like, what I call like napkin roses, those kind of things, balloon twisting, those kind of stuff. It's not magic per se. To them, it's like magic, and they get something out of it. And then do a little card tricks. And then when it becomes like more older patients, I do more puzzles, those kind of things. Rubik's Cube, they really like, and just more visual types things. So it really depends on the audience, but absolutely, from any age, I've learned to perform. Yeah, it just really depends. I can't really say like every time I perform for someone, it's the same thing. It just really changes. And I remember like when like there are like magicians that work with me, like the ones that are starting out, they're like, man, it keeps changing every time. I was like, you just gotta adapt. And I mean, it's just experience, it's just, I used to just go to every show or whatever, and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And that was my mistake. You just learn to adapt and go from there. And The one thing I will say, kids are very honest in the sense that if they say you suck, you really suck. And you better get. And so, you know, like you do your first kids show, and they're just like, you can't twist any balloons. I was like, no. They're like, well, you're not a really magician then. And you know, there's two ways to take it. It's like, yeah, well, it's not my problem. Or you could say, hey, this is a way for me to improve. And you know, but the one thing I will say, kids are honest and they make you better. So that's it.
Some kids are pretty tough audience members, and you know, going along those lines, I was thinking kids can be really tough, right? And do you have any experience dealing with like a really difficult audience? And in that case, how does that work? How does that transpire?
So usually it just depends how it works, but it's always like one thing I learned, I was very lucky. You know, David Blaine, by
Yep.
chance? So I was very lucky. When I lived in Buffalo, there was a magician named Garrett Thomas, and he's one of the big consultants for David Blaine. And so he's like one of the masterminds, because David Blaine has like a lot of consultants, and you know, they kind of come up with the tricks. But this guy, Garrett Thomas, I mean, he is just one of a kind. And I asked him a lot about this because I was like, yeah, sometimes when you get these kind of people, like, what do you do? And the one thing I learned is most people, I would say about 90% love magic. And then there's always going to be that 10-ish percent that are going to be tough. And it's, I guess, how you frame it. And the one thing I learned is when I start off performing, I say, you know, like, you know, my job here as a magician, it's not to make you believe something, but it's just to impress you. Play with your mind. You know, I'm not starting like a church down the street or anything like that. I just want to work. This is all about imagination. And I want to share a gift with you. And usually the time when you say I'm trying to share a gift with you or something, most people are more receptive to it. I mean, there's been times when I performed for very religious people, and they think like, you know, you're just, you know, and I made my mistakes there. And it's just over time. But with tough audiences, what I tend to do is like, you already have like your first few tricks that you do, and it kind of tells you like what kind of audience they are. Are they going to be receptive? Are they going to be the ones that you want to spend your time with, or are they the ones that you're just kind of like, you do one or two and you just move on? But usually it just depends. But most of the time when I deal with tough audiences, I do a lot of Rubik's Cube stuff, because the thing with the Rubik's Cube is there is really no gimmick to it. It's all skill. It's just practice. And the funny thing is, like, when I first saw those people performing it, I was like, I don't even know where to begin. You know, like, how am I going to crack it? So usually with tough audiences, I usually do a Rubik's Cube routine, because they mix it up and then you just do some crazy stuff with it. And then there's no explanation. And then I usually go into cards and those kind of things. But I usually try to do things that they could play with. That way they know that there's no trick to it. It's all, you know, and I say this is all just practice and skill. I'm just playing with your mind. I'm making you think, see or think things that are really not there. And then you just kind of play with them a little more, you know, it's just kind of fun. But that's how I do it. Something like Rubik's Cube and cards is usually how I deal with tougher audiences. And then the more fun audiences, the ones that I would spend my time with, I would do a little more game playing where it's like, you know, you show some money and then you make it turn like ones into hundreds, or, you know, you make things move a little bit. Those are the fun things. But with tougher audiences, it's not going to be as fun.
Interesting. Having to deal with different audiences, and obviously, you know, the connection between your work as a doctor and doing magic is, you know, you perform the magic. But apart from simply performing the magic, in what ways have you seen sort of overlaps between the two very distinct types of, you know, I know your main occupation is a doctor, but, you know, among the two works, what type of overlaps have you seen?
I guess a lot of it is, I always think medicine is like magic, to be honest. You know, a lot of the time, you know, like there's so much unknown. That's one thing I will say. Especially, certain things, yes, you just treat it, you know what it is, you do it. But a lot of the time, honestly, and I'm very honest with my patients when I take care of them, sometimes I don't know what's going on. And that's, I think, what's beautiful about magic too, is when you're doing things, a lot of the time people are just not sure what they saw or what's going on. And that's the overlap, I feel, is you think you know something, but then at the same time, you really don't. And a good one to say is like, we say like, oh, this is what we think is going to happen, but then it really doesn't, like I could say like, I'm taking care of someone with like an infection in the lung, and I say, hey, these are how I would do it. But it's not always, the outcome's never always going to be the same. There's so much unknown. There's so much variability. And that's what magic is like. There's so much variability too. And medicine, I feel, is the same. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. I don't know.
That's really unique that when you said, medicine is magic, or magic is medicine, or both. And
honestly, I do sometimes, they like, because I'm Catholic, and honestly, I do tell patients sometimes, I mean, especially in the US, there's a lot of Christians, and people pray, and I pray with them sometimes, because sometimes it's honestly, there's just so much unknown, especially the COVID thing.
I think that's a good segue into the COVID part. You work at a hospital. How has that affected at least where you're at right now?
So when I'm finished, well, currently I'm finishing up residency. Internal medicine's 3 years. And then if you want to do fellowship, that's another 3 + 2 or whatever many years you want it. But during my second year, just a few months ago, that's when the COVID really hit. And it was a lot of unknown, honestly, at that time. And it's scary because we didn't know much about it, and we still don't. And so I had the pleasure of basically getting all those patients from the ED upstairs. So I had to see a lot of them, and it was, crazy. It spreads like wildfire. And so a lot of the nursing homes, those kind of people who are quarantined together, you see a lot of it. And, we don't really know the treatment. I mean, we say we do, I think, and then we try all these things. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's where I come back to basically, there's just so much unknown to it. But it's changed everything, back when it was like the flu, you just wear a mask and gown and the thing. But now we're wearing masks all the time, wherever we go, even clothes and stuff, you got to change it all the time. It is heartbreaking, like when you see certain cases, kind of, count your blessings and keep going, as much as you can. And I think the worst part about it, in all honesty, during the COVID thing was when we didn't know much, especially in like March, April, May, that area, a lot of family members were not like allowed to come to the hospitals and stuff. And that was tough, I think, on family members, people pass away and stuff. At least now they do allow people to come in, I think that's in most major hospitals now. It's still tough. We still don't know a lot of what's going on. And I think the second wave is hitting right now, but we don't know if there's going to be a third wave. With the flu on top of it, it's just,
I have you on Instagram. We talked about this a bit off air. You're one of those people that have those schedules that I would call crazy. You call it normal. What got you into sort of these like 4 a.m., 3 a.m., like waking up times? And do you recommend it to people? Because I think a lot of people do, especially younger people, sort of aspire to be where you are now, right? Being a doctor, a full-time job plus a hobby that you're very active in. Yet, you also have time to do other things. So what got you into it? And is it something that you could recommend to everyone?
Yeah, so the thing I would, well, one, is this something I recommend? It's usually no. it's not for the faint of heart. But the one thing I will say, and the reason why I adapted it was when I was applying to medical school back in undergrad, it was not easy. It was very difficult. It was, it was not easy. And I mean, I took the entrance exam, the MCAT, which has changed again for some reason. It keeps changing every year. I took it 3 times, and I took it twice, and I thought to myself, there's something I'm missing. What am I doing that's not allowing me to progress forward? And then that was when I had like a moment where I kind of took a step back. I kind of thought to myself, okay, who are like the people I look up to? And that's when I looked at The Rock, known as Dwayne Johnson, Mark Wahlberg, those kind of guys. And I thought to myself, what do these guys do differently than anyone in the world? And like Arnold, those kind of guys. And the one thing that really stood out was these guys wake up so early and they're going to the gym. And so I started thinking, okay, all right, maybe I could try that. And then it was not easy, but it wasn't not just about going to the gym. And oddly enough, there's another guy. His name is, I think it's David Goggin. He's like one of the Navy SEAL guys. He does something very similar, but I'll get to that later. But a lot of these guys, but it's I guess the mindset of going to the gym and getting things started early. And it always comes back to that line of like early bird catches the worm. And the nice thing I will say is like waking up early is nice because that's when everyone's pretty much asleep. And going to the gym, it just kind of gets you ready. You could be really tired, you could be exhausted. That's what pre-workouts are for. And then you get to the gym, you kind of do your thing. But it's more of the metaphor. When you go to the gym, it's the metaphor of willing to put in the hard work to go after what you want. And so like when I'm doing heavy squats, when I'm doing heavy presses, it's all about all that things that hold you down, all the things you want, you're just getting it, you're controlling your life, you're going out there. And so that's what it symbolizes every time I go to the gym. It's basically symbolizing like all the hardships, all the things, you're just pushing through. And then that's what it really is. And it's just discipline. That way, like every day I wake up consistently and, do my thing. And so when I was applying to medical school, I would go to the gym, but then I would use that time after I woke up to study as much as I can. And then it's just keeping that same cycle over and over and over. And then I kept it throughout medical school. And it was tough. I mean, it's not easy. Even in residency, it's still not easy. But the nice thing is, if you keep something going, it just keeps rolling and rolling. That's it. It's just as long as you get 7 to 8 hours a day, then it should be okay. Sometimes you might get 6. Then you have the weekend to kind of, recover. But just that's my advice is, I mean, you got to be willing to work harder than anyone else. And that was kind of like the thing I learned when I was applying to medical school is you just got to, some people be very lucky, mom and dad maybe went to that medical school and they will get right in, or some people are just really good test takers and they get in. But, if you really want something and you know deep down you deserve it, come get it. And that's kind of the attitude I've had. So that's where it kind of boiled from. And, still waking up early.
Yeah, that's a great point about the metaphor. And, it's just, I guess it's a mindset at the end of the day, huh? I mean, it's not like everyone needs to lift weights to if they want to go to, vet school, veterinarian school or something. But, but the idea is still there. And I guess people don't even have to do heavy weights. I could be running. Right. It could be some kind of way to get up in the morning before everyone else. Yeah.
And it was kind of cool because, and to me, this was like probably one of, like, I guess now, like I'm in the part of life where I want others to succeed in their life. And it was really cool because, when I was going to, back in medical school, I met one of my best friends, and I got to know his brother, and then his brother's friends. And it was really cool because like they were all like, one of them was applying to dental school, two of them were applying to medical school. And, you know, life was unfair, you know, and like they're probably some of the most best people I've ever met. They make great healthcare providers, but they were just not getting accepted. And seeing that, living it, I gave my 2 cents and basically said, hey man, you just got to kind of figure out some kind of regimen that will work for you. And they did. I mean, they do theirs exactly the opposite of mine, where they stay up really late and then they wake up really late. But
yeah,
it works for them. And it was really cool because they took it to heart, and these guys all got into medical school and dental school. And so it was just really, it's like something that deep down you're just so happy that others are, you know, making it out, you know. And that was my biggest thing. It's not about, you know, where you are, but if you can get others to go towards their dreams and stuff, it's a good feeling, you know.
I can definitely concur, especially being a teacher. Although it does get it gets interesting because I'm in year 10 now. Good. Honestly, about half my students are now, you know, working. So the other day I was speaking to one of my students who was at Apple, and we were close enough to talk about salaries and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's what you make now. I guess you should pay for dinner next time, you know. But as you said, it is nice to be in that position now in life where I could sort of be like, go, you know, go get what you want, and like I'm here for you, like to support you in any way I can, you know. But that's definitely a much more rewarding feeling almost than your own success. And I think this just about takes us towards the end of the interview, where I like to conclude by having the guest tell us what is coming up in their lives the next few years, next few decades, what sort of aspirations you have as a doctor. And yeah, so that's my last question to you. And
absolutely. So it's kind of a weird transition now. Medical school's 4 years, residency's 3. So it's coming up to about 7 years of, you know, extra schooling. So now I guess the transition now is you're looking for a job. And so I guess the nice thing with internal medicine is you can choose to do more fellowship training or work. And so it usually kind of divides into 2. One, you could just work at the hospital, like they call it hospital medicine. Or you could do clinic, where you do like, primary care stuff. But the trend now, honestly, has become more hospital medicine. And the nice thing about it is you work half the year and you're off half the year, which is really, it's like, it's a relatively new thing. It's been ongoing for the last few, like maybe decade or so. But yeah, you just work like a week on, you're off a week, or you could work 2 weeks on, you're off for 2 weeks. It's 12-hour shifts. So I'm thinking I will do hospital medicine for a little bit, travel a little bit, you know, and then see where life takes me next. I'm still kind of deciding where I plan to go. I've been thinking about Las Vegas, to be honest. Las Vegas, Seattle, that area. And the reason why is because Las Vegas is where magic is. So I'd be close to it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think everyone usually thinks gambling, not magic, but
they do. So I thought about that. Seattle is just a beautiful place, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to be around. But no, honestly, it's just doors wide open. You just kind of apply around, and you kind of see where you go. That's one part. So yeah, that's the nice thing. So you work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 1 week on, 1 week off. So, and then the other thing I was going to plan on doing is more magic. But the other thing that I've actually been getting into before medical school, I trained as a sushi chef for 3 years, oddly enough. It was kind of cool because I never thought that skill of making sushi would have like translated to a big thing. So like it was a great way to meet more people, because for some reason like sushi is becoming like a phenomenon in the US. And so from there, like I just started catering to people, like certain attendings. I mean, they have money, so I mean, they're not going to, they'll invite you over and you just make it. But the other thing I started learning when I was in medical school too was mixing drinks, like mixology. So I took about 3 years during my medical school crafting my own drinks to basically pair with all the food that I serve out. So sometimes you'll see on my Instagram I'll put out food or something, but I'm planning to make a business out of the catering thing down the line too. That's become another project. There's always something different I'm trying. Wow. So life is short. So, that was my second project that I'm working on. That's kind of like underground. But with the whole COVID thing, it's probably not going to be for a little bit. But other than that, that's kind of where I'm at. Just going with the flow, magic, sushi, and then hospital gigs. So I'll be able to come visit somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you sound kind of like a one-man party right now. So you'll provide the sushi and then provide the drinks and then provide the magic as well. And it's like, oh yeah, he's also a doctor. So
that's the funny part. We don't tell people. I just kind of keep it down low. Usually I don't tell because people treat it differently. I don't like it. So usually I just say, oh, I just work in the hospital. And that's it. That's it. Unless if, that's usually it. And that's the nice part when you travel. People don't know who you are. You just kind of just do your thing. Maybe a few magic tricks here and there. And then you just say, yeah, I just work as a magician, and then you just go from there,
Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned that. I've heard it's kind of similar with, I don't know if you're aware of this phenomenon that basically Japanese people apparently are really poor at identifying like foreign artists. So like even Ed Sheeran, his name is somewhat well known in Japan. Apparently he can just walk around Japan, and that's why he loves Japan, is that no one stops him.
That's good. He must like it.
So I was thinking it's very similar maybe with your ideology of, not saying you're a doctor. You don't want to be treated differently. So you're kind of like...
That's true. And the nice thing is, like, as a resident, you're still in training, so you're just kind of like, you're like the middleman kind of. And then, but once you're an attending and you're you got your full-fledged boards, all that, people do treat you differently. That's what a lot of my friends have told me. So I don't know. It's just different. Even I guess like when I went on trips, and sometimes when people find out, because you're with others and stuff, I guess people sometimes can treat you differently. But for the most part, I just usually hush it and just go with magician. That's usually what I do. But yeah, that's usually how I do it.
Well, I'm excited to hear about these future endeavors and the different mixing drinks and the sushi and I guess wherever you end up, huh?
Come to Vegas if I make it.
It's funny you mention. Yeah, I definitely, Vegas is on the list. Vegas is on the list once COVID is gone. So maybe that's where I could see the magic in person. That was episode 33, season 4. And thank you, Tom, for being a guest today. And hopefully I'll see you in Vegas in a few years.
See you there.